Welcome to the Queens of Quality. I am Michelin Bradley, and my Queens of Quality co-host is Jen DeMarco. Jen has over 25 years of experience in the life sciences and pharma industry. She worked in quality management roles through the entirety of the product life cycle, including commercial organization that implemented a CIA consent decree. She brings a unique perspective. She has a chemistry degree, 2 masters, one in business and the other in quality assurance and regulatory affairs, and is a Sigma 6 black belt. She operates where the disciplines of business, science, and operational efficiency converge. Jen has a keen understanding as to how these areas impact one another. This experience, along with her sense of humor, is why she is a key Metis consultant and why I personally wanted to work with her on this podcast.
Thanks so much, Michelin. And if I could, Michelin Bradley has over 20 years of experience in the life sciences and pharma industry. She has worked in clinical settings, pharmacovigilance, IT, quality management, and consulting roles. She has been in the quality department. She's been in the safety department. More specifically, she has been the safety department and has also worked for some of the largest pharmaceutical organizations in the world. Clearly, she has a breadth of experience from small and the N of one to being amongst many in the team. Her focus in the industry was predominantly in opening lines of communication between internal and external groups. She is interested in working with emerging markets, especially Latin America, is fluent in Spanish as well. And she's founded Metis in 2016 and has continued to expand the vision and service capabilities ever since. I'm really excited to be here with you today and to be part of the Queens of Quality.
Yay. All right. So today,
Episode 1.
there we go. So why are we doing this podcast? Right? There are so many one-offs that we run into in the world of GXP in so many companies where there are some really basic and highly concerning misconceptions about what the responsibilities are within the GXP spaces. We make things harder than they need to be. It is human nature. So let's lighten this up. Motherfucker. We're gonna start that part again. I meant to fucking put that thing on. All right. We're gonna start that episode 1 thing over again.
Okay. Should I start from episode 1?
Yeah. Okay.
So, episode 1.
Why are we doing this podcast? There are so many one-offs that we run into within the world of GXP in so many companies where there are some really basic and highly concerning misconceptions about what the responsibilities are within the GXP spaces. We make things harder than they need to be. It is human nature. So let's lighten this up a little, bring some humor and some humanity into this, and build the quality framework so that we can focus on the fun parts, making better medicine and devices to improve quality of life for patients.
I know when we first started to talk about this, Michelin, we were kind of, back and forth, is this something that people would want to know? And, would we really have anything to say? And then we started to talk about our first topic, which is why it's our first topic. And it became the springboard actually for the Queens of Quality as it exists today. So I will ask the question and get the conversation started. Michelin, what do you think the difference between compliance and quality is?
So, quality is the action and compliance is the output. So, in my view, compliance as a verb, in order to be compliant, you have to do something. And this is where we differed because Jen.
No, because I had a mentor once who told me that compliance was a verb. And that's where I looked at her like she had 4 heads. I'm like, "No, it's not, it's a noun." Like, I was very technical. And that's where she started to explain to me that you had to actually do something in order to be compliant with something. And that's where I was like, "Oh," like, that was the cosmic 2 by 4 for me. And it was just like, "Oh, now I get it." Where you actually had to do something in order to be compliant.
Right. So compliance as the strategy and quality as the execution tactics, and
Correct.
checking to make sure that
Can
the
we
strategy was
stop?
executed.
Can we stop?
Yeah,
Sorry. I think we just completely screwed that piece up
we
because
did.
that's my anecdote in terms of the compliance is a verb kind of
Yep.
thing. So I don't know. I see it here that it has been actually attributed to you, but I don't know why.
Well, so
I feel like this is actually backwards though for some reason.
I
Or
think it
some of
is.
it's like it I feel like the verbiage is not right here. Like I
Yep.
feel like, because you talk about the quality is the action and compliance is the output.
Right. And then
And
you
I
say
talk
compliance is a verb.
right. And I talk about how compliance is a strategy and quality is the execution tactic.
Okay.
And that's where the execution piece comes in and the compliance as a verb anecdote usually comes in. So I just reordered it.
Okay. All right.
And I think you can go into I thought you went into a little bit more about how to make sure this quality and compliance is the output. I felt like you went into more detail there last time. Because the whole point is to show how we have different perspectives,
Right.
which is kind of what got us here. So we got our intros down.
You know what? It's a fucking chart, man.
Take it as a win. Okay, so do you want me to ask the question again?
Yep.
Okay. So let's start from here. Take 2. So, Michelin, as we think about this podcast and how it all came to be, this is the question we talked about. What do you see the difference between compliance and quality as?
Okay. So in the way that it works in my head is that quality is the action and compliance is the output. Because if you have the quality system, then you have a compliant output.
Excellent. Great.
And then Jen,
So, for me, compliance is the strategy and the quality piece ends up being how the strategy is executed. So essentially, the quality is the tactics. And I had a mentor once who talked about compliance as a verb, and I was so confused because I'm like, no, it's not. It's a noun. And she was like, okay, think about it. You had to do something to be compliant with something. And that with something also made a huge impact on me as well because there's always a frame of reference. that you have to utilize in order to demonstrate you're being compliant with it. Whether it's the GMPs or the GCPs or, any other law associated, with the regulatory environment. You have to be compliant with something. And then in order to be compliant, you have to have those quality processes in place and quality oversight and that quality culture that ensures that you're actually executing to the point where you can produce a high quality output.
Exactly. And the reason that we're talking about this topic in this episode is because we're setting the foundation and defining the framework, because we use the same words and they have different meanings.
All
So
the time.
yes, yes.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so this was a classic example of how we use the same words and they have different meanings. And we see this throughout, especially within our industry, right?
Right.
Like, you say coding to a PV group and it means different than when you say coding to an IT group.
Exactly. And people use, especially compliance and quality, they use those terms interchangeably.
Right.
And it's like, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, what are you talking about? And it becomes it's a very interesting dynamic, especially when we talk about the corporate culture and, what is the organization's approach to these topics, because they are different topics.
Yes.
And I love that you talked about the foundational pieces and the framework, because I think in pictures and I talk in analogies and, kind of the real world application type of thing. And, the immediate thought that comes to mind for me is the idea of building a house.
Yep.
And that foundation is perfect. That's the quality in my terminology of quality and my definition of it. The foundational piece is quality,
Yep.
and the framework, it comes from your quality organization. The plans, and this is where I come back to the strategy piece for compliance, like your architectural plans are your compliance piece. And then even kind of, if you want to take it one step further, the roof it becomes the compliance piece as well, because you want to keep it all under the same umbrella. So there's a couple of different ways to kind of work in the concepts of quality and compliance within the construct of building your organization.
Exactly. And without the solid foundation, without the, structural framework, you're always putting out the fires instead of preventing them. You're always preventing the collapse of the system without being able to rely on that.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so I think that it's really important that we do set that framework and do emphasize like communication between departments, making sure that there is that quality framework.
Mhm. Agreed. I've had clients say, well, I just need to make sure my house, my shop is okay, and my house is okay, kind of thing. And it's a really great idea. And if I kind of apply that to that house idea, you can have a fabulous kitchen, but what if your bathroom doesn't function? Or it's not plumbed well, as you talk about the communication lines, like what if your IT function, IT goes through all of the different, rooms, as it were, so what if, your IT infrastructure wasn't necessarily able to support this fantastic kitchen that you want to have?
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
every other construction project that you may have had.
Right. And to go back to the roof analogy, when I bought my house, it was a fixer-upper,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a colleague at the time who didn't understand why putting in a new kitchen wasn't my first priority, but putting a new roof on was.
Right.
And no matter how many times I explained, if I have an amazing kitchen and the roof
Right.
caves in, then that's not gonna work out.
You can't cook anymore in your amazing kitchen.
Right,
It's not supported by that. Yes.
exactly.
Hmm.
So this is just one of the reasons that, the quality framework is critical.
Right.
So what does that look like?
Hmm.
And that looks like communication between the departments, because
Right.
it's not always about the SOP, and it is about what the execution looks like.
Exactly. Right. Because you could have an SOP, and I'll just use that as kind of take that example. You can have an SOP that's really basic
Mhm.
and will, as we say in the inspection world, pass the red face test kind of thing. That doesn't mean it's going to ensure that things are executed at a high quality
Right.
and that all of the pertinent departments are working in the same fashion.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many SOPs, and something tells me you may have experienced this yourself, where, you know, I have an SOP that says I'm going to do something. You have an SOP that says you're going to do something, but I have to give you something in 5 days according to my SOP, and your SOP expects it within 3 days.
Right.
But I don't. So immediately, you know, Jen's putting me out of compliance with my SOP.
Right.
And that, again, that tension gets built within the organization. It's like, oh, well, you're not giving it to me when I need it. And the flip side of that is, I didn't know you needed it then because I'm being compliant with my SOP.
Right. And that's why it's really important to have any group that is touched by a process review for that,
Right.
because there are different facets to what goes on within the organization
Right.
that all need to come together to make things work out.
Mhm.
And what we're working toward here is success for everyone.
Right. Yep.
I know that that sounds totally cheesy, but
No.
we want the we want our clients to be successful. We want our clients to be successful within the framework of the regulations
Right.
from the international health authorities.
Mhm. And you mentioned it earlier, it's that communication piece.
Right.
Because if you're not talking to each other and if you're not understanding what the right vernacular is, kind of bringing it back to our earlier or our premise for this particular episode is we need to speak the same language.
Right.
If you're not speaking the same language and haven't agreed to what those terms mean within your organization, you don't have a culture. That's where, again, those tensions start to happen, those
Miscommunications.
miscommunications, those challenges between organizations, especially as, the quality organization, having worked in house, you know, I generally didn't show up in someone's office or call them on the phone because they're having a good day.
Right.
It's because something happened that went slightly askew. And that's how the quality organization got involved. And I can't tell you how many times it's like, oh, we can't tell quality, or oh, I shouldn't say that because quality's here. It's like, well, that's really unfortunate, in terms of the culture, because that's how having that perspective, and understanding what the requirements are and understanding what the pitfalls might be, being an objective third party, if you're talking about audits and that type of thing, gives the functional areas the perspective and the objectivity to ensure that they are being successful from a regulatory perspective.
Yep. Absolutely. And, you can't go back to, it's very difficult to have the perspective of, oh my goodness, this went wrong. So we need to try to cover it up and fix it
Mm,
ourselves. We can't get somebody else involved in it. We can't get the quality group involved in it. Um, because we can't fix problems from the same place that we created them.
right. Right. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Right.
And it, again, kind of like thinking of the house analogy, right? If I screwed up the cabinets, am I really the right person to do it again? You know, or if I continue to do the same thing again, it's like, okay, well, like this is now the third time I've installed this and it's still not right. Well, there's a common theme there,
Right.
and it's systemic, and that would be me. You know, it could be the way that I'm reading the instructions, the way that I'm using the hammer or whatever you use to put in cabinets. I've never done that before. I have done tiling, but that's beside the point. But that's where again, it's you're not objective because so many people I know are take their work very personally,
Right.
and it takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-awareness to say, "Oh, I think I need help."
It does. Absolutely. And it takes, another step beyond that to say, you know what? I was wrong about this.
Mhm. Yep. And that's unfortunate that that kind of approach, is seen. It's that whole thing is, and I've seen it just in society a lot lately, as we talk about bringing the humanity into what we do, you know, it's a matter of, that emotional intelligence to say, you know, I'm not the best person for this. Perhaps I need somebody to help me,
Right.
or, when you have a leader who is of service, versus a dictator, kind of thing. It's like, I've seen the leaders of service kind of get looked at sideways, kind of thing. Like, what are they doing? Because you could be authoritative and, order people around, but that's the old adage is that you're leading out of fear versus respect.
Right.
And so many people end up being afraid, and there's this sense of fear that, oh my gosh, I have to be perfect. And no one is perfect. No one.
Right.
So that's where I actually really appreciate the quality and compliance space, because as much as I know that perfection is not a reality, you know, how can we be the best version of ourselves that we can be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can we show up with that for eh, for our internal teams, for, you know, growing the circle larger. So there's your internal
Mhm,
team, there's your internal department, there's, however the structure is
mhm,
of within the organization. But really the bottom line is we are working to provide the highest quality, safest product
mhm.
for the clients, for the
Right.
patients.
Yep.
It's about the patients.
Absolutely. Ultimately, yeah. Right. Because if the patients aren't being taken care of, then we no longer have an industry.
Right.
Yeah.
And we see this. We
Uh-huh.
see this all the time.
Yep. And I had, about the fear piece of it, and that, being things being anxiety provoking. I was doing an inspection preparation activity, so it wasn't even the actual inspection yet. And there was a person, it was their first time in terms of the inspection construct and understanding what that really meant. And they just had this look of, they were petrified kind of thing. It's like that, very much that deer in headlights, and their hands are shaking and their voice is shaking. And I hadn't even asked the question yet. In character kind of thing, and I just took a pause because, luckily they were really the only person in the room kind of thing. And this is when we were actually in face-to-face scenarios as well. I went over to them, I sat next to them, and we kind of had a moment, and I'm like, okay, you need to breathe. And they're like, what? I'm like, let's just sit here and breathe, a couple of things, because this is all okay. And I said, this doesn't have to be a scary activity. You are very good at what you do. And they looked at me like I just told them the meaning of life. And I was like, this is your opportunity to tell people how good you are at what you do. You don't have to be perfect at what you do. So, but this is how you can demonstrate to them that you really do know what you're doing, and that you are as good at your job as I know you are. And it completely changed the entire dynamic in the room,
Right.
because they went in with that concern and fear of getting in trouble and saying the wrong thing. And I know their work. They had nothing to be afraid of, kind of thing. So it was very that mental, I call them the mental gymnastics that, you know, I am familiar with the mental gymnastics in a couple of different areas. Did I mention I'm not perfect? But that's where it was just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, they're not there, and I have not been in a health authority inspection where somebody came in and, they were just going to, they had their shovel and they were just going to dig until they found something, and they were, because that's who they are. And like that, they were not aggressive at all.
Right.
And I have found when that happens, it's usually those being inspected who end up having that defensive mode. And, you call it the war room, and it's us against them. And it's like, it just has such a unfortunate connotation and dynamic associated with it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be confrontational.
Nope. And we're going to talk more about inspection and inspection readiness and
Absolutely.
how to prepare for inspections and why regular audit prep is really important in our next episode.
Absolutely. Excellent.
So
fantastic.
Thank you so much for joining us, and please let us know what you think. Please let us know if we've helped. Please let us know if there are any topics that you want us to cover in future episodes. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelin.
Thanks, Jen.
I wasn't aware we were ending.
I figured we were getting way too much.
But you were right. I'm glad that you ended it the way that you did, and
I
how
wanted
you ended
to like
it.
have a thing that said focus, like come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, because that should put us at about our sweet spot that we were
Yeah.
looking to be.
Yeah, that 15-minute mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about audits and inspections now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like why, and then like why regular audit? We'll just talk about it.
Okay. We'll see where it goes because I have some really strong feelings about CROs and like vendor audits.
So long as your strong feelings mean that they need to fucking be done.
Oh yeah, they
Okay.
do have to be done. It's when, well, they need to be done by us.
So I put a statement into one of the, I think it's in the Queen's Quality Doc that I had written for like an aside thing. And I think when I put it in there, you were like, what the fuck? That the US FDA has stated repeatedly that independent auditing firms such as Meta are the preferred choice because the potential for conflicts of interest is eliminated.
Right.
And that we further assure complete transparency by taking this FDA endorsement to a higher level because we do not conduct or manage clinical trial processes. Medis is well positioned to emphasize our 100% objectivity and independence across comprehensive portfolio of critical services.
So here's me playing devil's advocate.
Yep.
And kind of to like, Jeannie's comment a couple weeks ago about the value proposition, right?
Uh-huh.
How do you outsource your audits, which they should be? I agree with you, they should be, without it being a tick box activity.
But that's something we're going to talk about in the thing.
So I'm gonna prod that, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll work it in somehow.
Yeah.
Or like if you say to me, just like, oh, I feel very passionate about this. I don't know if this is the right way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Episode 2. Take 1. Okay.
Welcome.
I can't wait to hear the feedback from your editor.
They're going to be like, what the fuck?
Okay. Focus. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welcome to episode 2. And we are going to talk today about audits and inspection, audit readiness, inspection readiness, audits and oversight.
This is one of my favorite topics.
Yes.
This is where I show that I am an absolute quality and compliance geek. I'm okay with that.
So long as you're good with it. That's
Yeah.
the important part.
Right.
And I agree. This is one of the most important parts, I think, in what we do within the industry. Because this is an opportunity for us to check ourselves.
Right. Yep.
It's also an opportunity for us to ensure that that quality framework that we talked about in the last episode is actually in place and allows for us to continually improve our processes, continually improve the work that we do, and provides a greater understanding of the work that we do.
Right.
Because it's not just one team who is impacted, it's across the board. This is a reflection of the work that is done by the entire organization.
I had a client ask me how many audits and inspections I've ever done. That was kind of my response. I was like, you want a number? And it was a legitimate question, again, based on the conversation we were having. And it was kind of like, I started to really think about it. And I was like, okay, well, there's, how do I break this out? There's the ones I've led, there's the ones I participated in, there are the ones that, I supported, like it's that whole, like, there's so many different, to your point, it is not done in a vacuum.
Right.
And when I talk about like GMP inspections, people are like, oh, well, you were in the PV department. Why were you in a GMP inspection? I was like, if you have to ask me, and I have seen, I call it the pivot, that when the health authority gets there for a particular, focus area, they have like a GMP or GCP inspection, because of the circumstances, they pivot and they go down a different line of questioning in a area. And even though they may have started out in a GMP or GCP, whatever, their original,
Yes.
initial was, they end up talking to another department much more extensively than who you would think is the quote unquote target department or the
Yes.
responsible department. And it
Yes.
goes back to your comment that we talked about last episode about the communication lines and how everything is connected.
Yes, it is. It is. And having done mock inspections, the things that you learn about an organization from who they send to represent different groups for a mock inspection is very telling.
Absolutely.
For fair disclosure, Jen and I actually met when I was doing a mock inspection of a company that she worked for.
Mm-hmm. It was still in house. Yep.
Yep. And, the first day I picked out people, not maliciously, but they couldn't answer the questions that should have fallen under their knowledge base.
Right. Their immediate remit.
Yes, they're absolutely their immediate remit. And so I said, these are not people who should go before the actual inspectors.
Right.
Like day one, let's eliminate these folks. Don't even bring them in the room. There's no
Right.
point.
Yeah. And back in the day, I had a colleague who would say, they're the people you give movie money to. These days we binge watch, right?
I love that.
And, we have cell phones and we're all connected and that kind of thing. But, back in the day, as I date myself horribly, they're like, go watch, the Star Wars trilogy. It's playing at, whatever. And here's $20, which included your popcorn. That's how long ago it was, right? We cannot get a hold of that person. They are on, sabbatical or an island or something like that. Do not be in the building.
Right. Yes.
And then there are those people that you just want to clone.
Exactly. Exactly.
You don't care what topic it is. You just want to clone them because they just have that, they're comfortable with it.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I mentioned this is my favorite area because so often it's perceived as, they're trying to find something wrong, and it's like, well, no, let's kind of flip that around. And I alluded to this in the last episode where this is your opportunity to tell them how fantastic you are. Do you have areas for improvement? Yes. Did you identify them yourself? That's the best part. And you're working on it, because if they have to tell you what your problems are, that's a problem.
Right.
And that never goes well. It's, needless to say, it's an uncomfortable conversation, you know, but that's where, again, like there's this sense of, oh my gosh, they're going to find me out. It's like, well, no, to just tell them how fantastic you are, and you tell them the truth. Like, I'm good at what I do. Full
Yep.
stop.
Well, and so yes, that is absolutely valid for inspection.
Yep.
And we also have internal audits
Yep.
where, identify the pieces that you think need work. This is the time and the place for it. And this is also something that we have seen time and time again, both as in-house team members and as auditors, where you go in and the team members will say, you go in as an auditor and the team members will say, if you could please include this in the audit, because we have tried to
Yes.
kick this up the chain and we get no response. But if you put this in the audit report, then they'll listen to you.
Right. Yep. More than once. Yes, that's happened.
And make that part of
Mhm.
the finding, and add a finding about communication with the people who are actually doing the work.
Right.
If they say that there is an issue, listen to them.
Right. Yeah.
Hear them.
Right.
They are doing it. They can identify it.
And that goes immediately to the point about, if the health authority finds it and either you don't know about it or you're not doing anything about it, that's less than desirable, shall we say.
Right. You don't want a 483 because the health authority told you,
Right.
and then it's something that your team members have been telling you for years
Right.
or even
Right.
for months.
Exactly. And that's the challenge too, because we talk a lot about the communication and the dynamics and the culture of the organization. Because if people are not being heard,
Right.
then that's not going to make for a very pleasant workspace.
And, all of this is viewed very much as, soft skills, soft points, but they're not. They're really critical.
Right. And,
It's very critical that all of these pieces be addressed.
mhm. Right. Because the more pieces you have, the harder it is.
Yes.
And that's where, again, and I fully appreciate, and I have had to make those hard decisions myself, where you only have so much time, money, and resources,
Yep.
right? So you have to make the hard decisions as to what you're really going to address. So you don't have the resources to address everyone's concern or idea. And I think that the teams who are doing the work are the best resources for the great ideas, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And you just may not be able to get to it, and that's the reality of it. That doesn't mean it can be ignored in its entirety, kind of
Right.
thing. Some of the things that I've kind of worked through with clients is put it on a project plan, so you at least have acknowledged that within the, whether it's a finding from an audit or that kind of thing, that you've acknowledged that we've been able to um, put it on the to-do list,
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah.
And to move it a step out from the internal audit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I think it's really important to have an audit program and an audit plan that you set at the beginning of the year. Like these are the internal audits that need to take place. This is the internal work that we're looking at. And then that takes us to the next step, which is vendor or
Right.
supplier
Yep.
audits and
Mhm.
inspections. I cannot tell you how many times I have said the statement that I'm about to say. The sponsor
Mm.
is the ultimate responsible party
Mhm.
for all activities related to the development of their products. The sponsor is the
Mhm.
ultimate responsible party.
Right. Yep. I talk about abdication of responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah. And even in just general conversation with clients, I hear a lot of, oh, well, the vendor does that. And it's like, yeah. And that's like I've actually heard someone say that during an inspection. My vendor does that. And that's where it's just kind of like that just never again, it becomes a very uncomfortable conversation. And it's not the way you want to go about it.
right,
And the vendor piece of it is there's so many different facets to it.
right,
And you talked about the sponsor responsibility to it, you know, where I have come to appreciate bringing in an external body to do those kinds of audits. It actually promotes the relationship between the functional area or the contract owner and the quality organization,
yes,
because your quality organization is now supporting the function in the preparation and the activities and everything like that. Because when you outsource it, it's at the risk of sounding redundant or issuing my master of the obvious comment. It's someone outside of your organization. It's an objective third party who has no bias associated.
right. And regulatory agencies, health authorities have come out and stated that independent auditing firms are the preferred choice
Mhm.
because of the potential for conflicts of interest being eliminated.
Right. Yep.
And you we need to have objectivity and independence across the board for this. I've worked with clients who have said, well, why should we have an independent group audit this vendor when they have an internal audit team and they can audit themselves and let us know how they're doing. And I just think, does your fox watch your hen house too? Like what?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice idea because, again, you're generally in those instances, you're working with relatively smaller organizations where they don't have a well-developed quality organization or a lot of resources available within their quality organization. So, you want to be able to outsource it. So, yes, you can outsource it, but again, you end up out if you use the same company, you're including that bias.
Right.
You've now outsourced your bias.
Yes. And that's, I've had, I've had it go the other way where as an independent auditor, I've gone in to audit vendors and the vendor has said, I really view this as more of a partnership with the sponsor. And I've had to correct that and say, you're not a partner. They are responsible for your activities. You are the help. It
Yeah,
didn't go over well, but it had been a really bad couple of days by the time I said that, and things were just going really poorly.
yeah. Yeah, that's a little harsh.
It, it wasn't my best day.
Right.
We all
Yeah,
have. Do you remember Do you remember us talking about being human?
exactly.
Wasn't
Yep.
my best moment.
Right.
Wasn't my
You know,
best moment. But you know
and
what? It's still true.
it is, and that's where, I really respect a lot when, people talk about the collaborative effort and they trusted their vendors. And that's great because you need to have that level of trust. You also need to have that level of oversight.
Absolutely.
And you can take their recommendations and, again, that's why you outsource and you contract with people outside of your organization because perhaps they have a level of expertise you don't. And that's okay. You don't need to know everything. You need to ensure that what they're doing is aligned with the regulatory requirements.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's where, again, having that objective third party organization come in and do audits, whether it's for your vendors or even internally, ends up being I have found it to be a much more productive and ultimately a much more collaborative activity,
Yeah.
because, how many times have you heard, you probably don't even know. I know I can't count this high. How many times have I heard, that, quality is the police. And that's not the point. I had a situation once where I had outsourced an audit, which was great. I had an objective third party doing it. So I worked with the contract owner for the activity, and they got to know me pretty well. And they're like, should you be doing this? Which I thought was a fantastic question, because they were ensuring that I was going to stay objective. And I'm like, well, here's the beauty of it. I've outsourced that. So now I can actually help you prepare and help you be successful.
Yes.
And they were like,
Oh.
wow. I was like, exactly. Right. And that way, and then, what happened, 6 months later, or, whatever it was, they called me and they're like, hey, I have a question for you. And I was like, oh, like that is the best part of my day.
Right.
When someone says, I have a quality question, or I have a, question about compliance for this, that, and the other. It's like, it's a great day, and it all started with the audit. It was just a regular routine vendor audit.
See, my favorite is when I do inspection readiness training or
Mhm.
inspection ready, mock inspections. And I have people come back to me and say, I used what you told me in the readiness,
Mhm.
and it really helped.
Yeah.
And some of it is around like calming yourself, recognizing that the
Mhm.
inspectors are human.
Yep.
Um, and so it's okay.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so those are my win moments, is when
Mhm.
I have people come back to me and say that really helped.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, like I think the philosophy or the approach from the industry in general is shifting a bit, because I do find that more internal quality organizations are partnering much more readily with the functions, and the functions are being much more collaborative, and they're understanding that quality is not the police. So then you have the opportunity to outsource the audits, and the auditor is kind of the practice session, really, for an inspection.
Right.
One of the things, so it used to be, okay, you use the audits as the inspection readiness activities. You have your mock inspection where, you truly are in that intensity, and then
Mhm.
you have the inspection itself. I've seen an interesting trend with some of my clients where they want to have really like interview practice sessions. And it's kind of it's not an audit because it's not on the audit schedule. There's no findings and that kind of thing. But it's not the intensity of a mock inspection where you basically take everyone offline for a week. you know,
Right.
and it's not so disruptive to the day-to-day business kind of thing because everyone's busy, right?
Right.
So, what has been happening is that, or, the approach that I've been taking in terms of working with clients is, you know, working through the interview skills piece with them,
Yes.
and exactly to your point, I've had people come back to me and say, I'm so glad we did that because so and so came to visit 6 months later. And, they asked the same questions you did, and we knew how to answer them.
Yep.
And it's very much that coaching kind of environment where I think it was a little lacking before, because a lot of the mock inspection piece, because it is treated like an actual inspection,
Yes.
you lose the opportunity to get coached.
Right.
So that's where, again, I have, and provide that immediate feedback to somebody in terms of, okay, you probably don't want to phrase it this way. Let's kind of approach it that way,
Yes.
and, I'm like, okay, I'm taking my hat off because you're saying X, Y, and Z. I'm like, so that means I'm going to ask you about this, that, and the other. And they go, oh,
Right.
So let's try it again, kind of thing. And again, it gives them the opportunity to refine what they're really going to say.
Yep.
And how best to present the good work that they are doing.
Yes.
Without throwing their colleagues under the bus or saying, oh no, Michelin does that. I don't know about that.
That's not something that I do.
Right.
That's something that somebody else does.
Right. Oh, that's not my job. I love that answer. That's a really good answer.
Don't do that.
Yeah. That's the second thing that you shouldn't say in an audit. My vendor does that is the first thing. The second thing is, oh, somebody else does that.
And the third thing is, if you don't know the answer to a question,
don't make it
say, I don't know. I will find that information for you. Do not
right.
guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or lie.
Right. We're saying, I think it happens this way. It's like, no. If you find yourself heading in that direction, then you should probably not answer. Not probably. You should not answer the question.
Do not answer. Yeah. Yes. Say, I don't know.
I don't know. We will find out for you. Right.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's another piece, is the reason that we have policies, SOPs, and work instructions is not so that we can memorize everything, but so that we have something to reference, so that we can say, you know what, I don't know what this is exactly, and we can look it up.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's okay not to know, because again, you're not expected to know everything.
Right. Yeah.
And what I've seen too is that that's where the relationship and the dynamics between, because there's generally a quality person within the room, that's where the dynamics and the support that you get from your quality person should really come into play.
Absolutely.
Because if, that's where, they can say, we will, if you say, I don't know, that's generally where they would jump in terms of, and we will get the answer for you, kind of thing. Like that's where that dynamic becomes really important.
Yes.
I call it the chemistry.
Yep.
And no matter how many audits you go through, how many mock inspections you go through, you can't teach the chemistry.
Right.
And that, I think, is that's the magic ingredient, is making sure that
Absolutely.
chemistry is there, and, it gets built through the audits and the mock inspections and that kind of thing, but the last place you want to find out that it's not, that your reaction is off course, is during the inspection.
Yes.
Right.
And so, okay, so we've covered the importance of an audit calendar.
Yep.
The importance of, doing actual run-throughs of the communication.
Right.
Having the communication talks.
Right.
And
identifying the right people to be in front of an inspector.
Yes, identifying the right people. And this is something that we brought up before we were recording this episode, but performing the due diligence and performing, audits of your vendors, this is not to check a box. This is to actually ensure that they are qualified to do the job that you are hiring them to do. Because you cannot say, I've outsourced that.
Right.
You cannot say, oh, the vendor does that. You need to know that the vendor is doing what you are paying them to do.
Right.
Providing the services that you are contracting them to do. This is not a checkbox scenario.
Yeah, and I've seen it done in-house, outside, the whole 9 yards, where essentially you're given a checklist to go through, and you go through and you tick the boxes, and it's like that doesn't add value for the client.
Right.
And there's so many other risks associated with outsourcing to anyone, because again, you don't have that immediate view. Like you trust, you go through the oversight piece, not the, they're not part of your team, like it or not, no matter how much, you want to partner with them, they're not part of your team. So there are so many other risks that can come up. And one of the things that I started to do with, I've asked my clients, do you want extra blah, blah, basically the risks versus the non-compliances, because your non-compliances go into the audit report, but that doesn't mean you don't have any risks.
Right.
So again, kind of, I mean, when we talked about the first episode, you have to be compliant with something. So they may be able to demonstrate that they are compliant with X, Y, and Z, whether it's the regulatory requirements, their SOPs, or your contract, or all of the above. And that doesn't mean that there aren't any risks there. And that's one of the things that has really given some of my clients the insights that they need in terms of helping and demonstrating their oversight, shifting the relationship a little bit. Nothing drastic. They're not just going to go out and find another vendor. Like, that's not the intent of it. It's really to help the client make informed decisions so that they can better manage what they are outsourcing. And as you eloquently put it in the very beginning, the sponsor is ultimately accountable.
Yes. The ultimate responsible party is the sponsor.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
The whole statement.
Right. And that's where, again, if they know what the risks are, then they at least have the awareness to pretend, and to mitigate.
Yes.
Because the biggest risk in any organization and in life in general is that you don't know what you don't know.
Right. Okay.
So listen to those on the ground, because they know.
Yes. Listen to your team members.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you go through internal and vendor and supplier and partner. Partners are also very important to audit your partners. And set that up in an audit calendar so that you can do them. Like, I'm not saying you have to audit every vendor every year, because that should be determined by your calendar as well and by the quality department.
Mm-hmm.
But there should be calendared activities every year.
Right.
And training on all of that, because you want a wide variety of team members internally to pick from who have been groomed to be able to go before an auditor or an inspector.
Yep.
This is not just time to check a box. This is real activities to ensure that you are compliant with
Right.
regulations, with your objectives.
And to show them how good you are at what you do.
And to show them how good you are at what you do. Absolutely.
Mhm. I'm everybody's cheerleader.
So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Queens of Quality. Please reach out, let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to hear. And tell your friends.
Excellent. Thanks,
And we'll talk
Michelin.
to you next time. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording because
Okay.
I need a break.
Mhm.
I don't know how to stop recording. There it is. Fuck.